When you start to really make something that's like true to you and personal, or maybe taking a risk, that's where you get 5 stars and 0 stars. You want people to either love something or hate something, because then you know you've at least gotten an emotional reaction out of somebody. When you try to tick the boxes and please everyone, people watch the movie and go, it was fine. It's always like a 3 star out of 5. I think the biggest nightmare for a filmmaker, at least for me, is someone watching my film and going, it was okay.
Movies is just like bang, bang, bang. Whatever's out now. I don't know whether or not they'd go back.
I've met a lot of young people who like ask me what my favorite filmmakers are, or favorite films, and when I mention them, they go, "Oh, I don't watch films that old," and I'm like saying stuff from like the 70s, and I'm like, it's not that old.
Well, you think that, right? But then I've also just come to the conclusion, like 70s for me feels like 30 years ago. You know, but that's just what it's like in my head. But 70s is. Yeah, that's historic.
But I watch stuff from the 20s and 30s, you know. People are like, what the hell?
20s and 30s?
Yeah. I mean, my favourite filmmaker is, one of my favourite filmmakers is Chaplin. You know,
oh, yeah?
I love all of his films, and they're all like 20s, 30s.
As in, did he make films without him in it?
No, he wrote, directed, starred, and scored most of his movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the appeal of a Chaplin flick?
Oh, I mean, he's the master of mixing comedy and heart. He can have you laughing 1 second, crying in like a second later. Yeah. It's insane. Like his films just, especially films like City Lights and Modern Times, like, yeah, they just really get to me.
I don't think kids will be getting onto that, man.
I don't think they will be.
No.
It's a shame. I think people still will, like the cinephiles, and I think there still will be young cinephiles.
Just for the sake of studying the craft, the art of it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's like a dedicated filmmaker who wants to know about film history will watch them and appreciate them, but the regular people, no, they won't. So.
I even wonder about like a franchise like Star Wars, how in our generation, and I'm going to get canned for this, I haven't seen it. And that's...
Wait, you mean the original trilogy?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any Star Wars. That's not on me. That I'm going to put that on my parents. It's just something that they never...
It really is a parents thing because, you know, I was raised with it, you know.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it just... I never saw it. Wow. And at one point, it was... I had promised some friends that I would watch it before I'm 40, and I just turned 40, so I've missed that. I will get to it, but I feel as though, you know, like our parents, their generation introduced it to our generation. And now it's still around, obviously, it's massive, but now it's this big commercial Disney machine.
As soon as it became Disney, you know,
it has a very different take and a different feel, luster to it. I mean, this is someone who, I don't know much about it, but I feel as though just as an outsider's point of view, that it has a very different luster to it. It doesn't have that nostalgia attached to it.
Yeah, I have a feeling that people who didn't grow up with Star Wars, if they watch it as an adult, they don't appreciate it as much. Because like objectively, they're not like the most groundbreaking movies. They're just like these fun movies that when you're a kid and you watch them, they change your life.
Yeah.
You know, but I feel like if I watched the original trilogy now for the first time, I would think it's all right.
Movies is so the context of a movie, of how you see it, the time in your life is so integral.
Yeah.
to the appreciation of that, and that's the thing. Like, I'm a bit worried that I'm going to see it and be a bit of a hater.
You'll just be probably underwhelmed. You'll probably just be like, oh yeah, they're fun, and I see why people like them, but I have no like attachment to this at all, you know, but people do.
Yeah. Deep attachment. Deep.
I mean, I'm
like they'll die on that hill.
I'm a big Star Wars head, you know, but I mean, it's funny. I was, I love Star Wars, but also I often complain about Star Wars. And one time I was complaining so much about it, someone asked me, do you even like Star Wars? And
that's how much you love it.
You know,
that's how much
it's like I love it so much.
I
love it so much that I hate most of it.
You can critique it. You can see it for what it is.
Yeah, I just expect more of it.
Is it one of the best movies of conveying that particular trope?
Yeah.
That hero's journey kind of story?
Pretty much, yeah. But, you know, Star Wars, the original movie, Star Wars, before it was called A New Hope or Episode 4, when it was just one movie, you know, George Lucas borrowed from, like, so many other things. You know, he borrowed from, like, things like Flash Gordon and even like Kurosawa samurai movies. And he took all these like elements of like samurai movies and Western movies and space movies, and he merged it into like one thing, and it became Star Wars. And he just merged it very well. And that's why it became like the quintessential hero's journey.
Yeah, it is the one that has all the elements.
Every element. But it was borrowed from other things. You know, like you can't say that in 1977 they invented the hero's journey. That thing's been around since Shakespeare, you know.
It is a trope that has a lot of weight to it, and you know, through different cultures they have that particular story. Yeah, there's no delineation with what cultural background you're from. There's always going to be one particular story that fits that particular bill as well, that has all the elements to it. Maybe slightly differs just depending on the context of it, but it's a very typical trope. Like Dune, right? Well, there was Matrix before that, right? That was a big one. That was that one took that place.
Yeah,
right.
The typical story of the prophecy and the one and the chosen.
Yeah,
one.
the reluctant hero.
Yep.
Was that, and then you know the most recent one would be Dune, which I haven't seen the part 2.
I mean, these Dune movies were like cursed with their releases because the first one was delayed because of COVID, and the second one was delayed because of the writer's strike.
Yeah, man, I'm glad that they pushed through, because it was one of those ones that it took them so long even to get it into production.
Well, he drew storyboards when he was a teenager.
Oh, right.
Because he was always a Dune fan.
And
he thought one day, if I ever get to make a Dune movie, I want to draw these storyboards. And he used the storyboards that he drew when he was 15.
Awesome. He nailed it. Yeah. I was reading the book and I power read it like in the 2 weeks leading up to watching it. Oof. Finished it that morning. It was pretty surreal, man, because
your head would have been in all sorts. It's a dense book.
Yeah, man. Like I was dreaming about it for the 2 weeks. Like It was so ingrained into my psyche. But then when I got to watch it, he was able to portray it way better than I could imagine. I would think that I'm a pretty visual person, but then when I saw his portrayal of the environments, like that's what it looks like. I had it wrong.
Yeah, it's funny when you see after you read a book and then you see a film adaptation, and someone does it so well, and then you can't unsee it.
Yeah,
you're just like, that's it.
That's the one. Yeah, that's it. There, I think that's been the case for Harry Potter. So my wife tells me,
and Lord of the Rings.
And Lord of the Rings as well.
You read Lord of the Rings now, it's like I just see Elijah Wood, I just see Viggo. You know, like you can't unsee these people.
So speaking of film runways, you've just hit your funding targets.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
We raised it really quickly. Thank you.
Talk to me about that process. When did you first come up with this idea?
Yeah, so coming up with ideas for films. It's funny. I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we're talking about, because this is my second feature, and he asked me, are you going to do a third feature? And I said, well, I don't have any ideas right now. And he said, but what if someone came up to you with like $200 million and said, we'll fund your next movie, you got to write it in a month. Would you be able to? And I said, no. Because ideas don't come to me like that. I can't just get money and then an idea comes. Like an idea has to like form organically inside me. Something has to happen in my life, or I experience something, or I hear about something that I think is worth talking about. Because the things I make are quite personal and internal. If you're making genre stuff like an action adventure or horror, you might be able to come up with something quicker, like a gimmick. But an organic idea has to come from within. Now, this film, Westgate, came from within because it's about my mother raising me. And I'm 32 now, which is the age she was when she had me. So as I was getting to 32, I was having this sort of existential moment thinking about, what if I had a kid right now? My mum did it. And I don't know how she did it. And I kept thinking, like, wouldn't that be nuts if I had a kid right now? And it got me thinking about, how she was at that point in time. She had so many things going on, and being a first generation Australian, and cultural problems and financial problems. And I just, my life is pretty, thankfully to her, my life is pretty safe and secure and fine. And I think about all the stuff she went through, and I thought that was worth talking about.
Did you have this idea earlier on, or was it just this lived experience and you're like, you know what, this is now that moment. I want to sit down and consider whether or not I put together a movie that's loosely based on my experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I don't quite know like when the moment happens in my brain where I go, "Yep, that's the film," because usually like it creeps in slowly, and then I'll start, just writing things down on like a Word document, like visuals or ideas and things, and maybe I'll think of how the film starts, and I'll go, "Oh, that's kind of a cool start to a movie, and that's kind of a cool end to a movie," and things will come to me, and then once I get to that point, I go, "Okay, I think there's a story there." And then I'll start, before I even script it, I will write like I wouldn't say super detailed, but a fairly detailed, like structure of the film. Where they start, the first turning point, the midpoint, the darkest moment, the resolution. I'll try and map all that out before I start writing, because I find if I don't do that and I start writing, I'm just writing to nothing. And, the first act could be 50 pages. And you're like, oh, it should have been more like 20 or 25. So I have to do that sort of, and I also work out what my character's wants and needs are. I find those two things are very important in film. The want should always drive the story, like an external thing. Like, I need to get money, and that's what moves the plot forward. This person needs money. But then the need is what they learn later, and is more internal, and it drives the character. And in every scene when they want the thing, they have to be fighting with their need at the same time, until they get to a point where they go, actually, I don't really want this, I need this. And they, figure it out. So I spend time on that first.
I like that, man. I really do. And that kind of plays on this concept that I've been thinking about for the last little bit, about how we have with goal setting. And we have this out there. There's this thing that we want to try to achieve. But what that thing really is just a carrot that gets dangled in front of you just to get you moving along a particular journey.
Yeah.
And along the way, you encounter all the different, bullshit that life throws at you, and you just start meandering off that, and then you end up somewhere else. But the whole point of that for you, I guess, in that movie, that want is just the catalyst to get the thing moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they arrive at this point, it's like, that's what I needed.
Yeah, as soon as the inciting incident happens, which is in every movie, like what the character discovers that they need to do. Like in Star Wars, I guess the inciting incident would be like Luke deciding, I'm going to join the rebellion. That moves his story forward.
I don't get that reference.
You don't even know about the rebellion.
I do. Like, I know very little about it.
You know very little.
I know very little about it. So you just drop that. They'll get it. I might even just cut this bit out. I don't know. No. They'll get it. Whoever's listening.
I mean, it's like a 50-year-old reference nearly.
Yeah. See? No. Like,
there's no spoilers for Star Wars.
Dude, I've copped a lot of shit for not having seen it.
Do you know anything about Darth Vader?
I know who he is. I know that's the dad.
Well, that's
a spoiler.
That's the biggest spoiler.
That's a spoiler. Yeah.
That's the biggest one. That was one of the biggest spoilers of all time.
Was that in the first movie?
Second
movie.
Yeah. Ooh. And it's like right at the end.
Yeah.
It's when he learns that it's his dad. And
Okay.
it's like, it's huge because nobody knew about that spoiler except for George Lucas, the director, like the two actors and like one of the writers.
And was that planned before starting the production of the first one?
No, because he just made the first one as a standalone movie. Then it got so big, he was like, "Oh, I guess I'll make some more."
Yeah, okay.
And he had to like make a bigger story.
Yeah, I guess just like Matrix.
Yeah,
should have just left it at one.
Yep, a lot of the time they should.
So when you were planning out this movie and you're saying that you got the acts, how much consideration do you have for the cadence of the movie at that initial point?
I mean, I say I do a detailed like structure, but I don't like stick to it like gospel. Like it's there just to sort of guide me. And I often between drafts I end up changing quite a lot, but I need it for a first draft. I need to know where they're getting to. But then you do draft after draft after draft with your script editors and your actors, and everyone has an idea and to strengthen it. So sometimes it can change, but as long as you keep to that main core, like the main points and the wants and needs don't change, then the story will be solid.
You've created so much, a large chunk of the work before you've decided to go out and get it funded. So why would the funding happen at such a late stage rather than earlier on?
I mean, funding is so different depending on the filmmaker or the country you're in, or I mean, the Australian system is so different to like the American system. Like if you're an American filmmaker in America, you can make an indie hit and then a studio will bankroll your next movie. Whereas in Australia, if you make a hit movie, you still, for your second film, you know, if it's a big hit, you can get lucky and go straight to Screen Australia and get your government funding. But it's, you know, we're a much smaller country with a much smaller GDP and and less funding into film. So it is hard to get funding. I haven't really tried myself because of a lot of the red tape and stuff. I'm an independent filmmaker, so I usually just fund my own stuff and we somehow just get it made. But I am going to consider going for maybe some funding for post-production when we're in the edit for this film, because I did speak to somebody at Vic Screen, the funding body in Victoria, and they said it's worth coming back and having a conversation with them. So, but yeah, in terms of production, I'm just going out there and shooting it. I did a fundraiser, raised some money. I've been saving and working like crazy, and everyone's working, you know, for very little, but they're passionate about the film, so they just want to get it made.
There's so many different moving parts with putting together a production like this. I was speaking with Saray Taylor last week. She's a footballer by trade, but she studied the VCA screenplay writing. But she brought it to my attention, all the different creative inputs that you have with putting together a movie, right? All the different, well, not just the people, but the visions that they will carry and all the different disciplines that come together and form one cohesive body of work, right? Like how you would have the writer, which would tell the story in a different way to a screenplay writer. And then you'll have the director that will just see it differently themselves. How do you then integrate all those different roles? Because you do all of it. How do you distinguish one particular role and put together a cohesive project like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a struggle, like, especially when you're like both directing and producing at the same time, because you're balancing like two parts of your brain.
Yeah, so what's the friction? Talk to me about the different roles that they have and where's the friction? Well, where could there potentially be friction between the two?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, if you're making a film, like say in a studio level, the director should solely just be focusing on like the creativity, working with the actors and the production designer and all the creative elements, whereas the producer should be just doing all the like logistical stuff. Like, is everyone on time? Is everyone eating? You know, are we on schedule? All that sort of boring stuff. But when you're directing and producing at the same time, thankfully I have a producer on this one helping me, and she's doing a fantastic job and taking a load off my shoulders. But when you're doing that, you're balancing those two parts of your brain. You're on set and you're trying to get a good performance out of somebody. But then you're also thinking, you know, are we on time? Is everyone here? And, you know, is the food coming? And stuff that you sort of don't want to be thinking about because you just want to be focusing on the art. Mm-hmm. But it's such a process, and I find that to be a bit of a struggle. Some people are really good with it. Some people can just do it. They can just balance both those parts of their brain. I find it a bit tricky.
Well, I could imagine that someone who puts together, that writes the movie versus the screenplay writer, even just in that process and that level, that stage of the production, even there would be some friction there.
Yeah, there always is. I've got friends who are writers who have like adapted books, and you know, they write a draft of the screenplay, show the author of the original book, and they go, oh, you know, I don't know how you've changed this. But when you adapt a book, things have to change. I mean, books and movies are two different things. You know, sometimes you can say things in books, like internal monologues what characters are thinking. You can't do that in film unless you're doing voiceover.
And it's the sort of thing that you have to rely on the talent to be able to express all of that in just in an expression.
Exactly, yeah. It's a tricky art form. You know, I think filmmaking is just getting all different kinds of artists together to try and do one thing, and that's the hardest part. You've got, you know, makeup people, actors, production designers, directors, lighting people, photographers, and you're all trying to do the one thing. And it's the hardest. And that's why film sets are chaotic. You know, you hear about crazy chaotic sets because sometimes people just don't see the same vision. I mean, you try and find the right people to see your vision as a director. You try and find the right production designer, the right cinematographer. You try to explain to them, this is what I want. And they, you know, you entrust in them to give you what you want.
So there will be consistency in the team that you will work with, just to be able to maintain that, you know, there is that trust in the reliance on not just their skill, but to have this rapport with them, that you know what they do, they know what you do, and it's a lot of, I guess, like unspoken processes.
Well, it's why you do so much pre-production. You know, like before we shoot, I've been spending like 8 months on pre-production. I'm still like, once I finish here, I'll be going home and sending emails and making sure the shot list is done and making sure my production designer has got all the props. And it's pre-production is crazy.
Pre-production just being just the organization of it all.
Yeah, it's just everything you do before you actually go on a set and shoot. And it's probably the longest. I'd say it's probably the longest part.
Yeah,
A lot of planning and organizing, logistics, scheduling. You know, working out even the boring stuff like figuring out where people can park. If we're shooting somewhere, it's like, is there parking nearby? Is there transport accessible? Are there any toilets anywhere? Like things that you got to think of. Like if you're shooting on a street, it's like, where's the closest toilet? Someone's got to go to the toilet at some point. You got to plan this stuff. Otherwise people get upset.
Yeah, just film near a McDonald's or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or Hungry Jack's.
So you're now doing your second feature, man. Like I checked out a couple of your documentaries. How do you land on the themes? Because there was a focus on subcultures, right, and a lot of underlying thriving subcultures that don't even have a peek into the surface. A large degree, there will even be a reluctance for the public to peek into what's going on there. How did you arrive?
Yeah. Well, look, I went to film school, and like every film school kid, once they finish, they think, I want to make feature films, you know. But for me, the reality was feature films are expensive and difficult. But the main thing was I didn't have enough life experience to talk about anything in terms of narrative. So I had nothing to write about. So after film school, I sort of fell into filming in nightclubs. It's a long story, but I ended up just becoming a nightclub videographer. Me and my cousin did it together, and we were filming like 5 nights a week, like every week. I was like, I was 20, so I could do it then. I couldn't do it now. But we fell into that, and it wasn't just like regular nightclubs. It was these nightclubs, like a certain type of nightclub that played a certain type of music with a certain type of crowd. And as my cousin and I were filming there and got sort of, I guess, engulfed in this scene, which we enjoyed and we had fun times. It was fantastic. But there's always, like everything, there's a dark side to it. And it wasn't until I started speaking to like my parents and other people about what I was experiencing in these nightclubs, and that people were saying, I guess we don't really know about that. I mean, things like drugs in nightclubs and fights in nightclubs, it's always happened, but it was different. There were certain types of things going on in these clubs, and I felt it was something worth talking about. So I got together with a bunch of other videographers who, between the 5 of us, we had, terabytes worth of footage. So we just went through footage and found all the crazy stuff that we'd seen. And I thought, maybe this is something worth talking about. I just slowly started interviewing like nightclub people and ambulance people and all these different people from different sides of the scene. And I'm an editor by trade. So when you're making documentaries, you just shoot footage and work out the story later. So I just spent months and months just weaving this story together. And I felt there was something there. So I released my first documentary, Body Crash. And I just put it onto like Vimeo and like sent it to a bunch of publications like Vice and stuff, and they published it, and like within a week I had like 30,000 views, which was crazy. And then I wanted to make another one, so I thought, what's something else to talk about? And I ended up at that time on Instagram, urban exploring got really big. And I started following all these like urban exploring accounts, kids hanging off cranes and breaking into buildings and stuff, and I thought, well, that's something to talk about. And met up with them and hung out with them for like months and documented all their stuff and made my second. And they just sort of like naturally happened, I guess.
Then you deviated away from there, and then you started parlaying in the features. I guess that's always really is that the end goal?
Well, it was for me, and I feel like it is a lot for film students, at least ones who want to be directors. Everyone who wants to be a director wants to make feature films. So with
Proudwing Films, what was the first feature that you guys put together?
It was my first feature, Cerulean Blue, which, we made that for like very low money back in 2017. And for a very little film, it did very well. We got to have our world premiere at the Melbourne International Film Festival, which is the biggest in this country, probably I think biggest in like Australasia, this whole section. We had a world premiere there. We sold out 3 screenings, and it's now on Stan as a Stan exclusive.
Dude, that's quite elite, man, to go from working on documentaries to then taking that dive into putting together a feature. Tell me about how that one all came about. That's Cerulean Blue. Take us through that process.
Well, that one was a very personal story, like everything I write. And really, I'd gone through I wouldn't call it a breakup, but I'd gone through like a moment in my romantic life, something went really bad and I found myself in a very sort of dark place. And I sort of wrote the film to sort of express myself in how I was feeling at that point in time. And I wrote it not like originally with the intention of like making it, because in my head I thought, how the hell am I going to get this thing made, you know? But I just wanted to write it. So I wrote it, got it off my chest. And it wasn't until I started showing some people the screenplay, and mainly my friend who shot the film, my cinematographer friend Anthony, once I showed him, and he quite liked the script, and it wasn't until he said, you know what, I'll just shoot this film. And once I had him attached and his sort of, you know, him and his equipment sort of attached, I went, oh, well, you know, maybe we can actually get this thing made, you know? Because a lot of the time, the most expensive part is cameras and lighting and, you know, where am I going to get that from? But when someone comes and says, I'll do it for you, you know, that's like 40%. And I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a chance I can actually get this made. So I guess with a mixture of confidence and naivety, I got together like a ragtag group of people, my friends and stuff, and we just went out there and made it.
They are the two things that you need, especially when you're doing something as audacious as your first feature.
Yeah,
is having that confidence and being a bit naive.
It's definitely a mixture of naivety, I think.
What were some of the lessons that you took away from that whole journey?
I guess it was just like, I haven't really actually thought about that, but I guess some of the lessons from that are just in trusting in my team, mainly. Like, you can't make a film on your own. And I think if you bring the right people on and they believe in your vision, they'll get it done the way you want it. And I think that was the main thing, because when I was making the documentaries, it was pretty much just me and the camera shooting interviews and shooting, you know, cutaways and stuff. When you're working with like a team, which I hadn't worked with a team until I was in film school, which was like 7 years before we shot the film. So I haven't really made a narrative film for like 7 years, and I was doing a feature. It was, you know, it was crazy. I was in like territory I'd never been in before. And I think it was just entrusting in the team mainly. And I think it was, my favorite film is The Godfather. How cliche, you know, an Italian boy who loves The Godfather. But Coppola is one of my idols. And I once watched the commentary of The Godfather, and right at the end, Coppola was talking about when he was like at the Oscars or something, and people were coming up to him and saying, oh, Francis, you know, we loved your movie. You know, we loved how it was shot. And then he would palm off the compliment and say, oh, that was my cinematographer. Oh, but, you know, we loved the production design. Well, that was the production designer. And he kept palming off the compliments. And someone said to him eventually, well, what did you do? And he said, I just picked the right people. That's it. Mm. He's like, that's all I did. Everyone keeps coming up to me and saying, you're fantastic. It's like, I didn't do anything. I just picked the right people and they just did what I said.
You know, he was the visionary.
Yeah.
He had this idea. And that just gets me thinking about how contrasting the two processes are from the documentary making to putting together a feature. Because I'm just thinking about it now and just like really highlighting that there is a massive difference in the approach. When, you know, to your point, when you were saying that you just collect footage, you'll film, and then it'll be in the editing is when the idea will come to you. It's like, how do we piece this together so it is one body of work? Mm-hmm. Whereas when you're putting together a feature, that comes first.
Yeah.
Having that idea, having that feature, having that idea, having that narrative that you want to piece together, and then getting in the right pieces and the right ingredients to get that. Is there a preference for which way that you want to go, or is it just like it's a matter of just whatever moves you at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just what moves me at the time or what ideas I have. I have been thinking about, I'm reflecting a little bit and thinking that after I make this film, maybe I'll do another documentary. Just because I feel like I did enjoy the process of making a documentary more. I mean, I find it to be less stressful. And I had a lot of fun making those documentaries, whereas I do get very in my own head when I make features and like narratives, and I get very stressed because there's so much more at stake. You're working with more people and there's more things, you know, more wheels are turning. So I'm thinking that maybe I'll go back to my roots and do a documentary, maybe a feature documentary. I don't know. I mean, I've done features now. I can probably do a feature doc. You know, like because the other ones I did were only shorts. They were like under 30 minutes. So I think I could do like an hour and a half documentary movie. You know, potentially now if I have the right idea. I do have some ideas that I've been, you know, thinking about. Haven't like acted on them yet.
Man, I wonder how many documentaries it becomes uncovered when they start.
Oh, all the time.
Like all the time, right?
All
like
the time.
That'll be, I mean, like this is exactly how yours have just come about. You know, you have this particular idea and you set out to achieve this particular this narrative, and then it just sends you on this trajectory, and then all of a sudden you start unearthing all this other riffraff.
When you think about these documentaries that are made about like criminals or killers, and they're sort of documenting like as a court case is going on, they have no idea what's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to be found innocent or guilty or what evidence is going to be brought forward, or they're just like there for the ride, and they're just trying to figure out what angle can I move this documentary in, or it could be not about a criminal, it could be any sort of documentary, maybe just a character study on someone. And then when you're interviewing them, they drop a bombshell that no one knows about, and they just give you like an exclusive, like, oh yeah, this happened when I was a kid, and you're like, oh my god, and this changes the whole movie. Like, now we got to talk about this.
Do you know Jeremy Lin?
Name rings a bell.
Basketballer. There was this period called Linsanity that happened maybe about 10 something years ago. Pretty much what happened was that he was down to the last, he was on very short-term contracts with the New York Knicks, and injuries happened to the team, so he was brought on to play, and he just went off.
Like he was better than they thought he was going to be.
Well, it wasn't even just so much that he was better. Dude, he absolutely just went off, and he became an international hit. He had this whole underdog story, and New York Knicks is one of those teams that has a big worldwide following, being New York, but they weren't playing really well at the time. So he came in, stepped up, and carried the team on his back, and they won something like 5 straight games. There was a documentary that was being... Well, he has these videographer friends that were just following him around. The whole insanity thing was an absolute fluke. It was just more about this kid with the Chinese background that's now playing in the NBA. It's got his own story to tell, so they were putting that together. And it just so happens that while they were filming, he got called up to play and went off. For those that remember how incredible that moment was, he just became an overnight celebrity, where he went from being a nobody to having the #1 jersey sales.
Right.
So this whole documentary started off from just wanting to follow him around, and I guess he was like couch surfing at the time, and then just boom, just completely took off. So it was one of those ones where, it was the discovery of the story just happened while they were actually doing it.
It happens all the time, yeah. It's the fun of documentary filmmaking. You never know what's going to happen.
So you have you've raised, you've hit your target, and you're going to start filming. Will that be production?
Yeah, production.
Start production.
Yeah. Principal photography.
Start principal photography next month.
So early, like July, basically. July's our shooting month.
And what is that like? How many people do you have in your team?
Depends on the day. We've got some big days and some small days, but I would say it's anywhere between like minimum 8 or 9 to maximum 17, 18.
Jeez, man.
Something like that.
You'll have everyone on the Westgate payroll?
Yeah, well, I mean, we say payroll, but I mean, it's an independent film. Some people are getting nothing. Some people are getting very little. That's how I approach it. You say, I'll make an independent movie. I don't have a lot of money, but if you want to do it, if you believe in the film, we can make this together. And you really have to get people across that line and to believe in you. And a lot of the time, I found with this film, thankfully, a lot of the time I've actually secured a lot of people from the script. People have read the script and just gone, love the script, I'll do it.
How do you go about finding the cast, the people that you have playing, especially because you have someone that's going to be playing the character, which is loosely based on your mum, and then one of you. What's that process like?
Well, look, I mean, even though these characters are loosely based on like my mother and the young version of me, they are still their own character. There's only like some similarities, but when I write characters, even if they're based on people, I do try to make them their own thing. And I also try to infuse a bit of myself in a character as well. And I am like very similar to my mum anyway, so it wasn't hard to do that. But I'm not trying to find anybody who's like trying to do an impersonation or a caricature or anything. Like, my lead actress, doesn't look anything like my mum, but she's right for the role. Like she embodies that character. So it's really just trying to find the right person who I think fits, obviously is a talented actor, but also can fit the role and is keen to do it, really. And there's, lots of websites you can go to find actors, or you can ask people or follow them on Instagram. I just messaged my lead actress on Instagram. I'd followed her for a while. And
So, hey, you keen?
yeah, I followed her for a while, and I was just scrolling one day, and one of her pictures had popped up, and I went, maybe it's her. I just mentioned and said, hey, I know we don't know each other. Like, we'd followed each other on Instagram because I'm a filmmaker, she's an actor. I said, hey, I know we never met or talked, but like, I'm doing a film and I think you'd be great for the role. Do you want to do an audition? And she was like, yeah. Simple as that.
So you're already going in looking for particular qualities, or is it just let's cast it out and seeing what they bring into the role?
Yeah, I mean, the process is usually you send an actor like a scene or two scenes. I always send two, like maybe one that's more funny and one that's more sad. Two different ones, so you can see if they can do like comedy and drama, or be angry and nice, or you want to see different shades of them. So you send them two scenes, but you don't really give them much direction. You just give them the scene, and they will do a self tape and send it to you. And if someone does a really good self tape, then you sort of go, that's probably them. If they're able to do that without any direction, imagine what they can do under direction. And her tape was like fantastic. Like she cried and everything, and I was like, well, I mean, it's all there. Now it's just workshopping and rehearsing, and then we'll get it.
And what's the window that you've given yourself for this, for the primary,
like
filming?
for the filming? Well, we're shooting all across July, so we're doing like 16, 17 days, something like that, which is pretty short for a feature, but for an independent, the more days you add, the more expensive it is. So I'm pretty crazy about scheduling and trying to work out the most efficient and quickest way to shoot the most we can on any day. So we're shooting, a lot of pages on a lot of days, but we're gonna get through it.
Have you gotten everyone together already, just to kind of like, I mean, not even to discuss the movie part of it, but I'd imagine that there needs to be some sort of gelling, the team gelling, just to get everyone working in the same cadence and getting on the same page.
Yeah, I've got all my main people together. I'm still like trying to crew some smaller roles, but you can do those last minute. But in terms of the main heads of department, your cinematographer, your producer, your production designer, you want to get those pretty early and get everyone to meet and talk about it so we all understand, we're on the same page, And yeah, I had everyone on board even, I think, last year. So from last year, we were already like, group chats and talking about ideas and things. And actually next week, a week from today, we're actually doing our first recce's, which means, we're all going to a lot of the locations and like having a look at the location and making sure we're all on the same page, being like, remember in here, we're going to put the things there, the camera will be here, we're going to light it this way. And so that when we're on set, because when you're on set, every second counts. You don't want to be on set and thinking, how are we going to do this? You want to do it before. You want to go on set and everyone just knows, because every second matters. So you do it all beforehand. We're going to go all these locations and map it all out and go, this is how we're going to do the day. So when we get here on the day, there's no like, oh, but I thought we were doing, we discussed this,
Man, I want to go back to even before you got into it, because when we caught up, you mentioned that filmmaking wasn't even something that was on your radar.
No, it wasn't.
Take me through that trajectory. Like what was Adrian doing before film?
Yeah, so I mean, the before film Adrian was just high school Adrian, basically, because I went to film school straight after high school. But my story is basically like, I was always a creative kid, and my mum always knew it. That's why she sort of nurtured me in creativity. I was when I was in primary school, I was doing singing and dancing and theater, and as well as doing sports and stuff. Like I was just doing everything because my mum knew I was very creative. So she put me into a high school that was sort of a public school, very creative high school, very focused on the arts. And when I was at that high school, I think it was around year 9 when we did work experience, I decided I wanted to be an architect. I really liked architecture, so I did work experience with architects, and years 9, 10, 11, it was just like architecture. I was like, that's my thing. And it wasn't until year 12 where my year 12 media teacher, because I was doing media studies in year 11 and year 12, it wasn't until year 12 when my media teacher, Bill, he also ran a film school that was attached to the high school. So I don't know if he was just trying to get more students, but I think he saw something in me, because I was always into movies. I'm a film fanatic. I was always watching my whole life. And I got to talking about movies with Bill, and Bill just said, have you thought about studying film? And I went, well, no, because I don't know anything about making films or how to make money in that. Like I had no connections or like nothing. And Bill said, why don't you just do the film course? Like come back here next year. He made it real easy for me. He said, you don't have to apply. He said, just rock up here next year. Do a year. See what you think. And I went, okay. So I just did it. Went home and said, "Mum, I'm going to do film." She went, "Okay." I went there the next year and I didn't know anything. I mean, I didn't even know what a cinematographer was. I didn't know that you had to, hire a person to film it for you. I thought the director did it. That's how naive I was. And once I learned everything and, got into it, I just was like, yeah, I think this is it. I think this is what I want to do. And it kind of came full circle because Bill ended up coming to the world premiere at MIF of Cerulean Blue. And he was like, "Told you."
Do you see any of your inspirations that you've taken along the way? Because you've seen how many movies have you? Because you got that you keep this log, right?
I've got a letterboxd account. Typical cinema fan. Yeah.
Where would you draw this inspiration from, and do you notice it in the work?
As in, like, inspiration from my own personal work?
Yeah, from the movies that you have seen throughout your times. Is there any in there that have really just resonated with you deeply that you're like this, and somehow even consciously, subconsciously have just injected that essence back into your work?
I think there definitely have been, but it's really funny because a lot of the films that I've got a top 100, and a lot of the films in my 100, as much as I love them, they're not films that I would probably make myself, because everything I make seems to be these like sort of personal stories, whereas a lot of stuff I like is like genre stuff, horror or fantasy or sci-fi, and I can't imagine myself making stuff like that. But I think there's elements of those films, maybe the more like internal human elements of those films that do seep into my work. Every film I make, I always have references for the film I'm making, even for Westgate and for Cerulean Blue. It'll always be references for like visual or for performance or for pacing. There's always references. And I guess a lot of the films that I do reference in these films are probably in my top 100 or very close to being. So there's always elements of it, but it's more like the things I respect about filmmakers are people like Coppola, who like just go out and do it, or like Kubrick, who, I mean, he's my favorite, and I'm not saying I want to be like Kubrick, because there'll never be another Kubrick, but Kubrick spread himself across so many different genres. He did horror and sci-fi and war movies, and he did everything, and that's something I want to do. I would love to make a horror film maybe one day if I have an idea, but I think I respect filmmakers more than the films.
We consume media in very fast pace, very short cuts. How does that, or does it at all? Does it affect the way that you want to put together a movie?
Not personally, no, because I filmmaking and making feature films is a different art form. I mean, I think there are some filmmakers out there who they try to make films like TikTok energy level or something for the young kids to keep them like entertained quicker, but unless you're making that kind of a movie, it's not going to work. I mean, I believe in slow cinema. I mean, I love movies that are really slow. I mean, because I guess my attention span hasn't been affected. I can watch a 3-hour movie if I need to, in one sitting, and it can be slow as hell. It's not something that I take into consideration when I make a film, but I am aware that, and I'm not just doing it for attention span, but I mean, my last film, Cerulean Blue, was very slow. I wouldn't say it was too slow. I mean, I was intentionally making it slow. But with Westgate, I am trying to make a more intense, more faster-paced movie. But I mean, that's just for me, because I feel the story, it suits that story, So there's going to be more cutting and more chaos and more handheld stuff. And I mean, maybe by default that will like resonate with people with shorter attention spans, but it's not what I'm intending to do.
Where we are now at this particular time is always going to be defined by the counterculture that's happening in tandem. So when there is this drive towards these big blockbusters, they will set a precedence, they'll set a standard of what cinema is. But it's not for everybody.
No.
So there is going to be people out there that are going to be creating films and creating pieces of work, bodies of work that is the antithesis of what we have. And I think that there is always going to be a drive to want something that we don't have as well. Culturally speaking, maybe not necessarily to an individual level. So maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the moment where these independent artists and the lesser known studios that are doing alternative works like A24, that they're starting to really find their stride as well. They've been at it for a while, but they seem to be, really just cementing their place.
They're on the cusp of becoming a big studio and doing big blockbusters. I mean, Civil War was their sort of breakout into a blockbuster, albeit on a smaller level, but they're really trying to get to that, like, exciting cinema stage.
And I wonder what happens to them once they hit that point.
Well, that was apparently their, like, whole thing from the start. They were like, our whole thing is to be a big studio. Like, they did all these indie movies because they had to, but now that they're getting more money, their ambition is to become a major player.
So then it will be the A24 aesthetic, or the A24 brand in itself will set the precedence.
I guess
of
so.
What movies are meant to look like.
It's funny about this whole A24 look thing though, because I feel like a lot of people get confused by it, because A24 actually don't make a lot of the films. They just distribute them. So they just find films that they feel
that fit within their schematic.
Yeah. Fit. I mean, Talk to Me, the Australian film, isn't a prime example. That was they just made that movie. A24 watched it at Sundance and were like, yeah, this sort of fits within our style, so it became an A24 movie. But they had no involvement from when they were making it. That's like 90% of their catalog.
Actually, that's probably that's a fantastic approach, because it really just means that they don't have to make the movies. You guys go out there, you make the movies.
That's what distribution companies do. They just buy films.
Yeah, and then just give you guys a platform.
Yeah, and they play it on screens and put it on DVD, and that's what they do. That's what all distributors do. That's what all filmmakers should be striving to do. Like, one time make Westgate, the goal is to get distribution, get it out there.
And then would there be specific distributors that you want to try to target based on their catalogue?
Yeah, there's heaps, yeah. I mean, mainly Australian ones. International is always harder, but there's big ones in Australia, and yeah, they're the ones I'll be going to first. And sometimes distributors can be involved from the start. Like, in a perfect world, let's say Westgate takes off and becomes a big indie hit. Realistically, after that, I could write a third film and go straight to a distributor and be like, hey, I'm such and such. My last one was a big hit. I've got a script. Do you want to be involved? And they could be attached from then. They could go, oh yeah, we love this script. We'll get you a bunch of money, pre-sales and everything, and commit to distributing this film. And then once you have that, then you can get more funding, because you can go to Screen Oz and be like, hey, this big company, they've already said they're going to distribute my movie. So, give me $1 million. And they'll be like, okay, well, it's going to get made. It's going to be out there. So there's all these stages, in filmmaking.
I want to ask about critics. Critics in the film industry, because they seem to come hand in hand. I like to think that when you're creating a piece of work, and especially with the way that you approach your work, it's very personal expression. Mm-hmm. You create the work for you and for an audience that would appreciate it as well. But there's going to be some people that just won't resonate with it. So when you have people that would criticize your work, is it just a matter of them not getting it? Or is it just that, yeah, you know what? There is some validity in what you're saying. And maybe I could have approached it that way. Maybe I could have tried that.
I don't think it's about them not getting it. I think it's more about it just wasn't for them. I think if I approach it from, you didn't get it, that's me saying like, oh no, I'm smarter than you and you just didn't understand. That's not what it is. I think it's more just, if somebody watches the film and doesn't, say, emotionally resonate with it, maybe they haven't experienced that kind of thing before and can't relate. So it just wasn't for them. I mean, there's heaps of films that I love that people hate, and vice versa. Films that I hate that people love. And the films that I hate that people love, I'm not going to go on and say, the film just sucks. It just wasn't for me. I somehow didn't relate to it. Or didn't feel it. But most people do. So, I mean, who's wrong? Nobody, really. And I feel like it goes with criticism. I mean, film criticism or art criticism. I mean, it's just, I would never read a piece of criticism and then decide to not see a film. Because you can't make up your mind on if a film is good or bad unless you've seen it. So I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm not going to go see that movie because that critic said it sucks, so it must suck. I've got to watch it. Because there's been heaps of films that critics say this film is terrible, and I watch it and I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? I loved it. I think some critics could maybe watch a film and get very personally attacked by it, and then that can skew their criticism of it, and maybe their review will be more negative than it is positive. I feel like a lot of critics, they'll like, even if they don't like a movie, they'll be like, this movie wasn't good. I mean, I guess these parts were good. they'll mention a couple of things. That was good. That was good. That was good. But overall, it just didn't work. But I feel like if someone is personally attacked by something, they'll just be like, okay, this film sucks. And I'm angry about it. And I'm going to just like rant about it. And it's like, it just depends on so many factors. But I think all critics should, talk about good and bad things. Even when I don't like a film, I'll be like, I don't like this movie. These parts were good, but it just didn't work for me. I think that's what it should be.
As artists, you create something where you are the audience, right? So the film should be something that you create with you in mind as the viewer. And it shouldn't be something that you deviate too far away from, because then that's when you start to compromise the integrity of what it is that you're trying to make, right? Like, how many people do you need to answer to, right? Like, what is the spread of people that you were trying to create for? And then in the end, then who is this?
But you know what happens there? When you try to tick the boxes and please everyone, the result of the film is always just like, people watch the movie and go, it was fine.
It was all right.
It was fine. Like, it ticked all the boxes. It's a fine movie. It's always like a 3-star out of 5. But when you start to really make something that's like true to you and personal, or maybe taking a risk on, that's where you get like Francis Ford Coppola's film Megalopolis just played, and that's getting like mixed reviews. That's getting like 5 stars and 0 stars.
Perfect.
That's what you want. You want people to either love something or hate something.
Yeah.
Because then you've at least gotten an emotional reaction out of somebody. If you're generating love and generating hate at the same time, it's like, well, I've done something. I think the biggest nightmare for a filmmaker, at least for me, is someone watching my film and going, it was okay. I don't want that. I don't want someone to say it was okay. I loved it or I hated it.
That's true. That is exactly what you're going to be going for. But if you're doing it for yourself, then you would also come away with that kind of feeling as well.
Yeah.
It would be very extreme.
Yeah, I mean, even when you're making the film or editing the film, you could do a cut and be like, this sucks. And then you do another cut and you go, oh, actually, this is kind of good now. It's the same movie.
Through everything that you've done, going to film school, putting together the documentaries and working on features, what would be some of the valuable lessons that you would pass on to yourself, the kid that was in film school, or even the kid that was not yet in film school? What are some of the takeaways that you have arrived at now?
I tell you what, I got pretty lucky actually, because I got given a piece of advice when I was in film school that I've been using ever since. And it's something that I would now like tell other kids in that stage, or I would tell myself that if my friend didn't tell me it. And it's kind of a story, but I remember, so when I was in film school, I was in my first year, I befriended a lot of the older students who were in like their 3rd or 4th years, because I thought naturally they already know more than me. So I want to like work with them on their sets and see how they work, because everyone in my year level was just like me, had no idea what they were doing. I remember being on a set. I was out in Geelong on one of the shoots, and Anthony, my friend who shot Cerulean Blue, he was the cinematographer. And I remember just watching him set up some lights at the front of a pub, and he was like, yeah, put a light there and put a light there, and he was really confident, knew where everything goes. And I'm watching this guy going, how does he know what he's doing? Like, this is crazy. And I remember on lunch break, I sat with him and I said, Anthony, how did you know where to put the lights and stuff? And he said, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I went, really? And he said, oh, yeah, no, I have no idea what I'm doing. I said, but you looked like you were really confident. He said, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. He said, no one knows what they're doing, but you need to act like you do know what you're doing. He said, that's what we're all doing constantly. He's like, if and you hear it from the masters as well. Even Scorsese, he's like in his 80s. He's like, I'm still learning. Like, we don't know what we're doing. You just have to pretend you do. And that's what I've been using my whole life. I've always been conscious that I don't know things and eager to learn. But when someone's like, do you know how to do this? I go, for sure. I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Even when I do editing jobs, people are like, do you know how to do this? I go, yep. And they give me the job and I'm on tutorials on YouTube, how to do this, because I have no idea.
So just fake it till you make it?
I think it is fake it till you make it. I mean, but also don't think you know everything, because you have to be eager to learn, and I am always eager to learn. I'm always learning every day, but you need to pretend that you know what you're doing at least exude confidence
and manifest it.
Yeah, manifest the confidence, and I mean he was doing it, and I believed him. I was watching him going, this guy, man, he knows everything.
Dude, that's such an underlying trope that has been carried across through all the different episodes of this podcast. And I was speaking with Miss 180, another artist, and we came up with this just as we were riffing, delusionally confident. That's how artists should just be carrying themselves.
Yeah.
And just last week, after recording, Saray Taylor was asking me about some of my processes, and my answer was, I don't actually know what I'm doing. She goes, "Are you really?" Because I was like, "Oh no. Like at no point in any of these do I know what I'm doing."
None of us do.
And it shocked me. And when I was speaking with my wife that evening, I said to her, "It's like, you know what? I think some people think I know what I'm doing." But it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. At no point, like I feel as though with this podcast, I'm in a constant state of confusion. But then she was like, and to your point, she said, have you ever considered that no one actually knows what they're doing?
They don't.
That's how we just get through things. And those that say they know what they're doing are just full of shit.
Well, they're naive.
They're naive, yeah. So I was stunned. I was like, yeah, okay. Maybe that's how it is done. Maybe that's how you get things done, by not actually knowing, but just throwing yourself in it.
Just doing.
Just getting, just doing it.
It's not the knowing, it's the doing.
Yeah. And then after that, you know.
Yeah, well, you know a little bit more.
You know a little bit.
You know a little bit more.
Yeah.
You still don't know everything.
That's a good tidbit. And I think that a lot of people miss that, that there is this sense of imposter syndrome that runs through all of us, right? Like we're all familiar with that sense of imposter syndrome, but yet we don't quite appreciate that everyone around us, when we're in that position that we feel as though that we shouldn't be in, because we are at this, in surrounded by other probably more worthy candidates, they're thinking the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's what I've used my whole life. It's what I tell everyone. If someone, even when I'm on sets, I'll just tell everyone like, hey, we're just trying things. We'll see if it works.
That's good. That's how it gets done. That's how we create new things. That's how we push boundaries, and
especially when doing art, because there's no blueprint. You're just trying stuff.
Yeah.
You know if it's going to work.
No. Well, I mean, you feel it.
You feel it and you feel confident, but you kind of like, will it? We'll have to wait and see.
That blind faith. Dude, that's a really good bit. That's a really good bit of advice, man. I think that's something that we can all just sit with and just carry that with us. So you start filming next month.
Yeah.
People can go check out Cerulean Blue on Stan. And when will we see Westgate? It'll be next year, 2025?
Yeah, hopefully next year. Yeah, if I can get the edit done I want to have the film done by about March. Probably a bit too ambitious with that, because post-production takes a long time, but hopefully by next year, yeah.
And that'll be your entire focus?
Yeah. Once we wrap, I'm just like in edit mode.
Awesome, dude. Man, thank you so much, man.
No worries. Thank you for having me.